embarrassing 20 things everyone was guilty of in the 1950s and 1960s. Ever wonder what folks were thinking in the fabulous 50s and far out 60s? From ironing your hair to stuffing friends in a VW Beetle, these wild trends will make you laugh, gasp, and maybe even say, "I did that." Buckle up. We're diving into the most hilariously embarrassing moments of mid-century America. Cat eye glasses. Let's rewind to the 1950s, a time when glasses went from being strictly practical to downright fashionable, thanks to one unforgettable style, the cat eye. These frames weren't just for seeing better. They were designed to be seen, with their signature upswept corners, shaped like the graceful eye of a cat. They brought a whole new level of charm and elegance to women's eyewear. Before that, most glasses were plain, even a bit dowdy. But cat eye glasses flipped the script. Suddenly, women didn't have to hide behind their lenses. They flaunted them. Hollywood's leading ladies led the charge, showing the world that glasses could be glamorous. Think of stars like Marilyn Monroe or Audrey Hepburn, who helped make the look iconic. Before long, cat eye frames became the go-to accessory for housewives, teenagers, and style setters alike. These glasses weren't just trendy, they were empowering. They gave women a way to express personality and flair right on their faces. And the best part, they've never truly gone out of style. Even today, cat eye glasses are making a statement, blending vintage charm with modern edge. Whether it's nostalgia or fashion-forward thinking, one thing's for sure, this 1950s classic still knows how to turn heads. The Sea Monkeys Craze. Let's step back into the playful world of 1960s childhood, where a single comic book ad could spark days of excitement. And few ads did that better than the ones for Sea Monkeys. Imagine being a kid curled up with your favorite superhero story when suddenly your eyes land on an irresistible ad. It promised a magical underwater kingdom filled with smiling, cartoon-like creatures. Sea monkeys you could raise yourself. For just $1, you'd get a packet that claimed to deliver instant life. How could any curious young mind say no? Now, the reality was a little different. Sea monkeys were, in fact, brine shrimp. Tiny, nearly invisible crustaceans in a freeze-dried state, waiting for water to spring to life. No crowns, no tails, and definitely no underwater castles. But you know what? It didn't matter. When those little specks began to swim, kids were mesmerized. It was like owning your own science experiment, a living, moving world in a plastic tank. Sea monkeys might have been small, but the impact they had was huge. They stirred up curiosity, sparked imaginations, and proved just how powerful a bit of clever marketing and childlike wonder could be. It wasn't just about the pets, it was about the joy of believing in something magical. Conical bras. Let's take a trip back to the 1950s when fashion took a sharp turn. Literally. One of the most unforgettable style choices of that era was the conical bra, better known today as the bullet bra. At first glance, it might seem like just another undergarment, but it carried a whole lot more meaning than that. While the outer look for women still leaned toward demure and ladylike, there was something a little rebellious going on beneath those tidy sweaters and dresses. This bra had a very distinctive pointy shape, far different from the soft curves of previous lingerie. And it wasn't just the shape that made it stand out, it was who wore it. Big-name Hollywood bombshells like Marilyn Monroe, Jane Mansfield, and Jane Russell brought the bullet bra into the spotlight. They weren't shy about flaunting their curves, and when paired with a snug-fitting sweater, this bra created an unforgettable hourglass silhouette that screamed confidence and boldness. What started as an undergarment turned into a fashion revolution. It hinted that times were changing, that women were ready to be seen and to own their presence. Underneath all that 1950s polish was a spark of something daring, and the bullet bra lit the fuse. Dog collar anklets. Now here's one of the strangest fashion fads to come out of the 1950s. Teen girls wearing dog collars around their ankles. Yep, you heard that right. It wasn't a punk rock statement or a costume. It was a real thing, and believe it or not, it was all about romance. Picture a typical teenage girl back then. Bobby socks, saddle shoes, a poodle skirt, and right around her ankle. A dog collar, not on a pet, but on her own leg. So, what was the deal? These anklets weren't just for show, they were actually a clever way to signal relationship status. Wearing a collar on one ankle might mean you were single and looking. On the other, it meant you were already going steady with a boyfriend. The twist? The meaning of which leg meant what changed from town to town, so if you moved, you might be sending the wrong message without even knowing it. As odd as it may seem now, this quirky trend actually says a lot about teenage culture back then. Girls were finding playful ways to express themselves and send subtle signals, long before social media or texting existed. It's a charming, if a little weird, snapshot of 1950s youth. The Cowboy Craze. The Cowboy Craze didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was nurtured in the late 1940s and truly blossomed in the 1950s. This was when the cowboy spirit grabbed hold of the American imagination, especially that of the younger generation. Picture it. Neighborhoods buzzing with kids wearing cowboy hats, western shirts, and cap guns at their hips. They'd run around, pretending to be legendary figures like the Lone Ranger, ready for action at a moment's notice. But this wasn't just about dressing up for play. It was a full-blown cultural moment. Families huddled around their shiny new televisions to catch Western shows like The Roy Rogers Show, Gunsmoke, and The Rifleman. These programs captivated viewers with tales of the Wild West, offering a break from the rapidly changing world around them. The appeal of cowboys wasn't just about their outfits or tough guy images, it was the ideals they represented. Cowboys embodied qualities like honesty, courage, and self-reliance, values that hit home for many in an era of shifting norms and fast-paced modernization. This love for all things cowboy left a lasting mark on American culture, influencing fashion, music, and entertainment for decades. The 1950s weren't just a decade, they were a Wild West adventure that still echoes today. Which of these 1950s or 1960s trends do you remember most clearly, or actually took part in? Panty Raids. Let's turn the clock back to March 21st, 1952, and head to the University of Michigan, where a strange and wild tradition supposedly got its start. The first ever Panty Raid. On that night, a crowd of male students full of energy, mischief, and a taste for rebellion charged into a women's dormitory. Their mission? To snatch as many undergarments as they could get their hands on. It was outrageous, completely unexpected, and it didn't take long for word to spread. Soon enough, college campuses all over the country were experiencing their own version of the Panty Raid. For the guys involved, these raids became something like a coming-of-age stunt. They were bold, a little reckless, and definitely pushing the line. Collecting women's undergarments turned into a bizarre badge of honor, a symbol of daring and bravado. But the truth is, these raids weren't always hostile or one-sided. In more than a few cases, the women on campus played along, or at least tolerated the madness, with laughter, teasing, and even a bit of flirtation. Still, the whole thing speaks volumes about the shifting attitudes of the 1950s. Young people were beginning to challenge authority, test social rules, and explore new ways to express themselves. Panty raids, though frowned upon today, were part of a much bigger story, one about changing gender roles, campus life, and the early rumblings of cultural rebellion. Getting pinned. Let's travel back to the 1950s and look at one of the sweetest traditions that took root on college campuses: getting pinned. In today's world of texts and relationship statuses, it might sound quaint, but back then, this simple act meant everything. When a young man gave his fraternity or school pin to his girlfriend, it wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a heartfelt gesture, a public way of saying, "You're the one." The girl would proudly wear the pin on her sweater or jacket, letting everyone know she was officially going steady. It was a big deal, almost like a pre-engagement. Friends would cheer, there might be hugs and even a few tears, and for the couple it marked a serious step forward. This wasn't casual dating, it was a promise, a symbol of loyalty and love. The tradition of pinning reflected the values of the time: romance, commitment, and formality in relationships. But as the 1960s rolled in with its wave of cultural change, that tradition slowly faded. Social rules loosened, and dating became more relaxed. Still, for those who lived it, getting pinned remains a sweet memory of young love and the way things used to be. Beatniks. The Beatniks were a different kind of rebel. Emerging in the 1950s, they were often poets, painters, musicians, and thinkers who didn't fit into the cookie-cutter mold of post-war America. Picture this: smoky coffee houses, jazz drifting through the air, and circles of young people dressed in black turtlenecks and berets, snapping their fingers instead of clapping. These weren't rowdy rebels, they were soft-spoken philosophers, challenging the world through words, rhythm, and ideas. Writers like Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg were the soul of the movement. Their books On the Road and Howl, for example, didn't just tell stories. They shouted, questioned, and stirred up conversations that the mainstream often tried to ignore. Beatniks rejected the era's obsession with money, stability, and fitting in. Instead, they sought truth, beauty, and purpose, often on the road or in a dusty bookstore. They weren't just a passing fad. The Beat generation cracked open the door for the counterculture of the 1960s. Their focus on self-expression, their openness to different lifestyles and voices, helped shape the more inclusive and free-thinking society that followed. In their quiet, unconventional way, the Beatniks shook things up and made sure the world listened. Ant farms. Back in the 1950s, if you were a kid flipping through a comic book or a youth magazine, chances are you'd come across one of the most unforgettable ads of the era: Uncle Milton's Ant Farm. And once you saw it, you couldn't stop thinking about it. For just a couple of bucks, you could send off for this curious little contraption and wait with excitement as it made its way to your mailbox. Then came the real magic, the arrival of the live ants. Once inside their clear plastic home, the ants wasted no time. Kids would press their noses to the sides, eyes wide, as tiny workers dug tunnels, hauled sand, and built a whole underground world right in front of them. It was like having your own private nature documentary playing out in real time. But this wasn't just another toy. The ant farm sparked something deeper, a fascination with nature, with teamwork, and with the idea that even the smallest creatures had complex lives. It gave kids a hands-on science lesson before STEM was a thing. Watching those ants work was calming, curious, and kind of awe-inspiring. It wasn't flashy, but it stuck with you, and for many, it lit a lifelong interest in the natural world. Coonskin Caps. In the 1950s, there was one piece of headwear that every adventurous kid just had to have: the coonskin cap. With its furry body and that unmistakable raccoon tail hanging down the back, it became a runaway hit. And the reason? A Disney television miniseries called Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. Fess Parker, playing the legendary frontiersman, wore the cap proudly on screen, and just like that, every kid in America wanted one of their own. The moment Parker stepped into that role, a nationwide craze was born. Coonskin caps flew off store shelves, raking in millions for Disney. But this wasn't just a fashion trend, it was about something deeper. Davy Crockett, with his tales of bravery and wilderness survival, became a symbol of old-school heroism. At a time when TV was becoming a central part of family life, young viewers were drawn to these stories of grit and adventure. Wearing a coonskin cap meant stepping into the boots of a folk hero. It gave kids a sense of freedom, courage, and pride in American frontier history. More than just a costume piece, that little cap carried a big dose of nostalgia, imagination, and national pride. Thank you for watching. To continue with more content, comment 1 to let us know you're still following. Bondmania and the Space Age. Jump into the 1960s, a decade that wasn't just swinging, it was rocketing into the future. This was the era when the space race took over everyone's minds. With America and the Soviet Union battling it out in the skies, space fever spread fast, and it touched everything. Home started to look like something out of a science fiction movie. Designers cranked out rocket-shaped lamps, bubble chairs, and furniture that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. Fashion followed suit, literally, with people wearing metallic fabrics and bold designs that looked more like astronaut gear than everyday clothes. Kids were hooked too. They drank Tang, the powdered drink NASA used, and tuned into the Jetsons, dreaming of robot maids and flying cars. Science fiction wasn't just for kids either. Shows like Star Trek and Lost in Space captured the thrill of exploring the unknown. And suddenly, space wasn't just science, it was pop culture. But the 60s weren't all about stars and spaceships. They were packed with spies, gadgets, and secret missions. James Bond kicked off a worldwide spy craze with his sleek style and high-tech toys. Hollywood followed with Matt Helm, Our Man Flint, and hit shows like Get Smart and The Man from UNCLE, making danger look cool and espionage the ultimate fantasy. Gloves! Let's rewind to the 1950s when dressing up wasn't just for special events, it was part of everyday life. For women, no outfit felt truly complete without a pair of gloves. These weren't just for keeping warm, they were a must-have accessory that added polish, elegance, and a sense of social grace to any look. Whether you were heading to church, grabbing lunch with friends, or just running errands downtown, slipping on a pair of gloves was simply expected. There were rules too, rules everyone knew. Glove length had to match your sleeve length. Wearing a short-sleeved dress? That called for long, graceful gloves. Sporting a long-sleeved jacket? Then short gloves were the way to go. It was all part of the etiquette that defined the decade, when appearance, manners, and modesty were deeply valued. But gloves weren't just about fashion. They were about what it meant to be a woman in that era. They spoke to femininity, refinement, and pride in one's presentation. Even a casual outing felt like something special when you had your gloves on. It was a different time, where style wasn't rushed and every detail mattered. Gloves were the final touch that made a woman feel put together and poised. Tupperware parties. Although Earl Tupper came up with the idea for Tupperware in the 1940s, it wasn't until the 1950s that it truly found its place in American homes and hearts. Back then, these colorful, airtight containers were more than just a way to store leftovers. They symbolized modern living, a fresh take on how to keep food neat, tidy, and long-lasting. Housewives across the country quickly embraced them, not only for their function but also for what they represented: efficiency, progress, and a touch of style in the kitchen. But the real magic wasn't just in the containers, it was in the way they were sold. Tupperware parties popped up everywhere, turning living rooms into showrooms. These gatherings gave women a chance to socialize, swap stories, and watch first-hand demonstrations of how these newfangled products worked. It wasn't just about buying kitchenware, it was about being part of something exciting. For many women, hosting these parties also opened a door to financial freedom. They became consultants, built their own small businesses, and took pride in earning money and confidence along the way. Long before Instagram or YouTube, Tupperware thrived through word of mouth. It showed how personal connections, trust, and a bit of show and tell could launch a brand into legend. Beatlemania hits America. It was Sunday night, February 9th, 1964, a date forever etched into pop culture history. That evening, more than 73 million Americans gathered around their TVs, waiting to witness something new, something electric. And then, there they were. The Beatles. 4 young men from Liverpool stepped onto the Ed Sullivan Show stage. Guitars in hand, charm turned all the way up, and the moment they started to play, the world changed. It wasn't just the music, though. Their sound was fresh and wildly catchy. It was everything about them. The way they moved, the way they talked, and especially the way they looked. Those shaggy mop-top haircuts with bangs brushed across their foreheads were a world away from the clean-cut styles of the 1950s. It wasn't just a fashion statement, it was a flag of rebellion. Teenagers saw it and said, "That's us." And overnight, barbershops were flooded with kids asking for the Beatles cut. But their influence didn't stop at hair. The Beatles gave voice to a generation that was ready to break from the past. Their lyrics spoke to hopes, dreams, and change. They became more than a band. They were the spark that lit the cultural revolution of the 1960s. Hair straightening with an iron. Let's rewind to the 1960s when beauty came with a bit of bravery, and sometimes a burn or two. Back then, sleek straight hair was the ultimate look, but modern flat irons hadn't hit the shelves yet. So what did style-savvy young women do? They got creative. Enter the clothes iron, a staple in every household that suddenly found a second life in the world of beauty. Picture it. A determined teen drapes her hair across the ironing board, praying for smooth results instead of scorched strands. Often, it was a two-person job. Mom or a friend would carefully press the hot iron over sections of hair, trying to avoid burns and damage. It was risky, no doubt. One wrong move and your hair or forehead could pay the price. But for many, it was worth it. This do-it-yourself approach wasn't just about vanity. It showed the lengths women were willing to go to for self-expression. Without the fancy tools we take for granted today, they improvised, adapted, and made it work. Straightening hair with a clothes iron became a symbol of the era's determination, creativity, and the growing freedom women found in shaping their own identities, one pressed strand at a time. Was there a trend or moment we missed? Drop it in the comments. We'd love to feature it next time. Batman and Tiki culture. Holy nostalgia, Batman! Let's hop in the Batmobile and head straight back to the swinging 60s when Batman hit TV screens with a bang. Literally. Starring the ever-stoic Adam West as Batman and the spirited Burt Ward as Robin, this wasn't your dark, brooding, caped crusader. This version was all bright colors, cheesy lines, and over-the-top villains that leaped straight from the pages of a comic book. With unforgettable bad guys like Cesar Romero's Joker, Frank Gorshin's cackling Riddler, Julie Newmar's sultry Catwoman, and Burgess Meredith's squawking Penguin, the show packed a punch. Wham, bam, pow! Every week. Kids loved the action, the gadgets, and of course that unforgettable catchphrase. Same bat time, same bat channel. For a while, it was a ratings juggernaut, but as quickly as the Batmania began, it fizzled. By season 3, the novelty wore off, and ABC pulled the plug. Still, the show lives on in reruns and pop culture memory as a one-of-a-kind phenomenon. Now shift gears and head to the tropics, without leaving the mainland. The 60s also saw a wave of tiki culture crash onto American shores. With Hawaii's recent statehood and films like Blue Hawaii starring Elvis, people couldn't get enough of Polynesian flair. Tiki bars popped up everywhere, serving up exotic drinks in carved mugs with bamboo furniture, hula girl lamps, and ukulele music setting the mood. Even Disneyland got in on the act with its enchanted tiki room. But by the end of the decade, the craze began to fade, leaving behind some kitschy decor and fond memories of island escapism. Car stuffing. Hop in and let's roll back to the 1960s when teenagers found joy in the most unexpected places, including inside the tight quarters of a Volkswagen Beetle. That's right, we're talking about car stuffing, a bizarre but wildly entertaining trend where groups of teens would challenge each other to see just how many bodies they could cram into a tiny car. It sounds ridiculous now, but back then, it was all about fun, friendship, and pushing the limits. The idea was simple: squeeze in as many people as humanly possible, then shut every door and roll up every window to make it count. No one could be hanging out or left halfway in, those were the rules. And believe it or not, some folks took it seriously, even attempting to set world records. But for most, it was just a goofy way to bond, laugh, and maybe show off a little on a Saturday night. Stuffed to the roof with friends and bursting with laughter, these cars became symbols of the era's carefree energy. Car stuffing reflected the spirit of the 60s, spontaneous, rebellious in its own silly way, and full of youthful charm. It wasn't just about breaking records, it was about breaking free from the ordinary. Kids riding in the back window. Picture this. It's the 1960s, the family station wagon is packed, and the open road stretches out ahead. In the back of the car, a small child lies sprawled across the rear dashboard, gazing dreamily out the back window or dozing off as the scenery drifts by. Believe it or not, this was a common and even charming sight back then. Cars were built big and roomy, with wide back seats and oversized dashboards that practically invited little ones to climb up and claim their perch. Back in those days, seatbelts weren't required by law, and the idea of strapping a child into a special car seat was still a new and unfamiliar concept. Kids had the run of the vehicle. They climbed over seats, played on the floor, and treated the car like their own little playroom on wheels. To modernize, it may seem reckless, but at the time it felt like freedom. That image of a child peacefully riding in the back window captures a kind of innocence, a time when road trips were adventures and safety came second to the thrill of the journey. It's a warm, if slightly wild memory from a different era, when the ride itself was half the fun. Variety shows. Let's flip the dial back to the 1960s when television screens lit up with glitz, laughter, and unforgettable talent. Because variety shows were the kings of prime time. Imagine this: 18 variety programs airing across just 3 networks. That meant no matter what night it was, families could settle in and enjoy a whirlwind of music, comedy, and star-studded spectacle. Icons like Dean Martin, Danny Kaye, Danny Thomas, and Carol Burnett brought their charm and comedic timing into millions of homes. Every week was a fresh surprise. Silly skits, toe-tapping tunes, unexpected celebrity cameos, and moments of pure spontaneity that kept viewers grinning from start to finish. These shows had something for everyone, from grandma to the kids, making them the perfect family event. You didn't just watch a variety show, you shared it. What made the format so special was its unpredictability. One minute you'd be laughing at a wacky sketch, and the next you'd be swept away by a heartfelt song. But as the 70s rolled in, television tastes began to shift. Audiences leaned toward new formats, and the variety shows slowly faded. Late-night talk shows picked up some of the magic: music, interviews, comedy. But that golden age of variety remained unique. Posing on cars. Buckle up and head back to the 1960s when owning a car wasn't just practical, it was a statement. Your ride wasn't just how you got from point A to point B, it was your pride, your personality, and your passport to freedom. And what better way to show it off than by climbing up onto the hood and striking a pose? It was the ultimate snapshot of cool. Back then, car hoods were built solid. Thick steel, no plastic, and strong enough to hold a full-grown adult. So, whether it was a souped-up Mustang, a sleek Chevy Impala, or a shiny Ford Fairlane, you could bet someone had perched themselves proudly on the hood, camera ready. These photos captured more than just chrome and curves. They froze moments of youth, independence, and style. For many, that picture on the car wasn't just about the vehicle, it was about saying, "This is who I am." The open road, the roar of the engine, and that confident pose told the world you were ready for whatever came next. In an era of big dreams and bigger changes, the hood of a car became the perfect place to celebrate identity, freedom, and a future wide open. Paul is dead, and the Ouija board. Back in 1966, when Beatlemania was still in full swing, a strange and eerie rumor began to spread. Paul McCartney was dead. The story went that he had died in a car crash and had been secretly replaced by a look-alike so the band could go on without the public knowing. At first it sounded outrageous, but fans began combing through Beatles albums for clues, and once they started looking, they saw signs everywhere. People claimed that if you played parts of the White Album backwards, you'd hear hidden phrases like, "Paul is dead." The cover of Abbey Road only added fuel to the fire. Fans pointed out that Paul was barefoot and out of step with the others, which they believed symbolized a funeral procession. It was spooky, surreal, and totally captivating. At the same time, another mysterious trend was catching on: Ouija boards. Picture teens in a darkened room, candles flickering, fingers resting on the planchette as they asked questions and waited for answers from the beyond. Whether it was trying to contact spirits or solve a rock and roll mystery, people were hungry for the unexplained. The Paul is dead theory and the rise of the Ouija craze both reveal how the 1960s became a decade deeply curious about the unknown, the mystical, and the hidden meanings just beneath the surface of everyday life. Did we jog your memory or maybe uncover a forgotten fad? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this trip through the quirks of the 50s and 60s, check out the rest of the series. Don't forget to subscribe and share Past Not Past with a friend. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.